It doesn't always end with a loud slam of the door or a dramatic goodbye. Sometimes it ends quietly. At dinner, a phone left unanswered, a glance that passes right through you. Love doesn't always leave with a bang. It fades slowly, quietly. When someone starts to fall out of love with you, they don't always say it. Instead, they show it in small, subtle ways that can be easy to overlook, but impossible not to feel if you pay attention. If you notice closely enough, you'll see it. And it often starts with two things. The first change isn't dramatic or even visible at first. It's not a fight, and it's not a confession. It's a quiet shift. Their attention starts to slip away. This shift is so small that most people don't realize it until it's already started to cause damage. Attention is the currency of connection, and where someone focuses their attention shows you what they value, what they care about, and where their emotional energy is being spent. At the start of a loving relationship, attention is plentiful. It's in the way they listen to your stories, even the ones about mundane parts of your day. It's in how they notice your mood before you even say anything, how they ask questions and remember small details. They're present. They don't just hear your words, they experience you. But when love starts to fade, the first thing they start to ration is their attention. It doesn't vanish all at once. It fades like music being turned down, little by little. They still respond, but it's different now. Their eyes wander when you talk. They might still nod, still give polite acknowledgements, but the connection feels more surface level. The depth is gone. It's almost mechanical, like someone going through the motions of a role they've played too many times. Even if you can't find the words for it, you sense the change. The distance, the delays, the lack of curiosity. This isn't just forgetfulness or distraction. It's not the kind of temporary disconnect that happens when someone is tired or stressed. It's a deeper form of disinvestment. When someone no longer loves you, your inner world becomes less interesting to them. They stop asking about your thoughts, stop checking in on how you feel like they used to. If you express joy, it doesn't move them the way it once did. If you share pain, it doesn't stir the same sense of urgency or care. They might still respond out of habit or politeness, but the emotional spark is gone. They've stopped being a witness to your life, and that's a crushing thing. To be loved is to be held in someone's attention consistently, even in small ways. When you lose that, it feels like being invisible. You might start to wonder if you're being too sensitive, too needy, too much. But deep down, your body already knows what's happening. The tightness in your chest when you speak and feel ignored. The loneliness of being in the same room but feeling miles apart. These are real feelings. They're emotional data. The person hasn't physically left. They haven't made any big announcements, but they've started to check out. And you can see it in what they don't do anymore. They don't look at you the same way. They don't ask how you're doing and mean it. They don't follow up on things that matter to you. They don't remember that detail you shared last week. Their attention is elsewhere, sometimes on their phone, sometimes lost in thought, but rarely on you. This lack of attention creates a slow ache. It's not an explosion, but it wears away at you over time. If you're not careful, you might start mirroring this behavior. You shrink. You speak less, share less, you learn to hold back your own attention because it hurts to offer it when it's met with silence. This is the quiet start of emotional disconnection, the slow, quiet erosion of interest, curiosity, and care. And often it comes long before either person admits that something is wrong. When someone begins to lose love for you, one of the clearest and most painful signs is that they begin to remove you from their mental picture of the future. It doesn't happen all at once. It's a gradual creeping shift, starting deep within their mind in the spaces you can't see. At the beginning of a relationship, people naturally begin to imagine a future with each other, whether they're aware of it or not. They start to picture where they'll live, what kind of life they'll build together, how holidays will look, how they'll face challenges side by side. You become part of their long-term plans. Decisions aren't just theirs anymore, they're part of a shared vision. You're not just in their present, you've become part of their vision for what's next. But when love begins to fade, they begin to quietly undo that framework. You're no longer included in their long-term plans, and it's not that they make an announcement or explicitly leave you out. It's much more subtle than that. You start to notice that when they talk about the future, they use the word I instead of we. They start making plans without considering you. Conversations about long-term goals feel vague or evasive. When you bring up future plans, they deflect or act annoyed even if you're not pressuring them. What's really happening is that in their mind, they've already started the process of emotional separation. This shift can be hard to notice because they may still physically be there, still go through the motions, still show up for events and fulfill responsibilities, but the emotional investment is fading. You can feel it in their lack of enthusiasm about the future, the absence of excitement when discussing long-term goals. The future starts to feel like a door they keep half closed, and you're left standing outside, unsure if or when you'll be allowed back in. Sometimes people don't realize they're doing this. It can be a form of self-protection, a way of retreating inward when they're unhappy or dealing with internal conflict they haven't voiced. Rather than confronting their feelings, they start rewriting their mental script to exclude you. It makes it easier to justify the emotional distance they're creating. They've already started seeing you as a smaller part of their future. Because much of this happens internally at first, it can leave you feeling confused, disconnected. You may notice something's changed, but when you ask, you get vague responses or defensiveness. It's a lonely place to be. Still committed, still imagining a future together, while the other person has quietly moved on from that shared vision. The hardest part isn't just the lack of inclusion. It's the painful realization that the version of the relationship you thought was real is no longer shared. You might still be holding on to dreams, plans, and a sense of direction while they've already mentally and emotionally rerouted. You start to realize that your hopes are no longer mirrored. Your plans are met with hesitation or silence. The rituals of the relationship continue, but the soul of it, the mutual dreaming, the co-creation of a life, is gone. And you're left in an emotional limbo, tethered to someone who might still be physically there but has already begun to emotionally walk away. When someone starts to lose love for you, one of the most painful, subtle signs is what can be called micro-dismissals. These aren't loud arguments or dramatic rejections. They're small, subtle shifts that you might not even notice at first, but over time, they build up like rust on a car. These micro-dismissals chip away at the foundation of mutual respect and emotional safety. A small change in how they respond to your thoughts. Maybe you share something that excites you, and instead of engaging, they give a flat or a sarcastic remark. Something that once would have sparked a conversation or a laugh is now met with indifference. It's not that they disagree, it's that they don't care enough anymore to engage. They don't validate your voice, and over time you begin to feel less valued in the relationship. You might notice that your jokes don't land as they used to. They used to laugh easily, but now they barely smile or offer a condescending grin. These moments might seem small, easy to brush off. You might even rationalize it. Maybe they're just tired or stressed, but they start to accumulate. You feel it when they interrupt you more often, speak over you, or fail to acknowledge something important you've said. It's the way they forget things that matter to you, even when you've mentioned them more than once. It's how your emotions are met with impatience or dismissed as overreactions. These aren't loud forms of neglect, but they're damaging, and because they're so subtle, it's hard to confront them. It's easy to second-guess yourself, because they're not yelling, not calling you names. They're not storming out the door, they're just quietly shutting the emotional door on you. One indifferent look, one half-hearted comment, one overlooked detail at a time. These small actions signal a retreat of empathy, a decrease in emotional connection. And that's the part that starts to hurt deeply, not because of the behavior itself, but because of what it signifies, a loss of care. Another form these micro-cycles take is in how they react when you're vulnerable. Maybe you share something that has hurt you, something you need, and instead of responding with understanding, they roll their eyes or sigh, not dramatically, but just enough to make you feel like they're already emotionally detached. You begin to feel embarrassed for even bringing it up, like your emotional needs are now a burden. This is the danger of micro-dismicles. They teach you to shrink yourself, to express less, to doubt your own feelings. You start to expect their indifference and adjust accordingly. Until one day you realize you've stopped sharing pieces of yourself altogether. And what's frightening is how normal it can all seem if you're not paying close attention. The human mind is great at adapting, even to painful situations. You begin telling yourself that this is just how relationships change, that maybe love always quiets down over time, that you're just being too sensitive. But deep down, you know something is off. You feel the disconnection not in big dramatic moments, but in the empty spaces where intimacy once was. It's in the way they shrug when you try to connect, the pause before they respond, the lack of warmth in their voice. These small dismissals are a reflection of a bigger emotional truth. They're no longer reaching for you, and they don't seem to care that you've noticed. When someone starts to fall out of love, one of the most obvious signs is the slow decline of intimacy. It's not just the physical kind, though that often plays a part, but the deeper emotional intimacy that sustains true connection. At the start of a relationship, intimacy flows easily. There's a deep desire to know and be known, to explore each other's inner world, to create a space where vulnerability feels safe and even exciting. You talk about your fears, your past, your hopes, your random thoughts that no one else would understand, but with them they feel welcomed. There's a kind of emotional openness that exists when love is strong, where being understood feels as vital as being loved. But when love begins to fade, intimacy is something they begin to withdraw from. It starts in small ways. They stop asking the deeper questions. Conversations that once lasted for hours now become shallow and transactional. You ask how their day was and the answer is just fine. You try to open up and they respond with indifference or distraction. They stop sharing pieces of themselves. They no longer talk about their stress, their thoughts, or their internal struggles. They begin to keep things to themselves instead of sharing. The emotional connection that once tied your worlds together begins to weaken, and soon it feels as if you're both living in your own separate worlds. Physical intimacy often follows this emotional retreat. It becomes less frequent and less meaningful. It's not necessarily gone entirely, but it changes. Sometimes it feels like a routine, something done out of habit or obligation, not out of desire or connection. The little physical gestures, holding hands, a hand on your back as they pass by, leaning in just because, those start to disappear first. What used to feel spontaneous and filled with affection now feels planned or even avoided. You start to notice them leaning away instead of towards you. You notice the silence after a kiss. You notice when they go to bed earlier or sleep farther from you than they used to. These aren't always acts of cruelty. Sometimes they're just signs of emotional distance, indications that the warmth has started to fade. And often, more painful than the lack of physical or verbal intimacy is the growing feeling that your inner world is no longer a place they want to visit. The things you used to share, the dreams, the memories, the silly thoughts that didn't make sense, now feel like burdens to them. You begin to hesitate before you speak because you're not sure if they'll care. You start to measure your words more than before. You begin to censor your emotions because somewhere along the way their reaction became harder to read, colder, or even critical. When you do share something vulnerable, their response feels distant, distracted, or uninterested. You begin to feel alone, not because you're physically by yourself, but because the emotional closeness that once defined the relationship has disappeared. And it's confusing because everything may still look normal on the surface. The routines are the same, you still have dinner together, talk about bills, make plans, run errands, but it all feels disconnected. It's as though the spirit of the relationship is missing. It's like the lights are on, but no one is home. You're not partners in life anymore. You're simply coexisting. This loss of intimacy doesn't always come from malice. Sometimes people pull away because they're struggling with their own pain, their own confusion, their own dissatisfaction. But when love is alive, people reach for each other, even in their pain. When love fades, that reaching stops. The silence becomes longer, the connection becomes harder to find, and the feeling of being emotionally alone becomes the painful new normal. When love begins to fade, one of the most telling changes happens in how routine is managed. What used to feel intentional and full of meaning starts to feel mechanical. The relationship continues its daily rhythm, but the essence that once made it come alive is gone. It's not that the day-to-day actions disappear. Meals are still made, texts are still sent, chores are still done. But something vital is missing beneath the surface. The effort that used to be driven by affection, desire, and emotional investment is now replaced with a sense of duty, or worse, indifference. In the early days of love, routine itself is a form of intimacy. Making someone their morning coffee, remembering how they take it, picking up something small from the store because you know they like it. These aren't just tasks, they're acts of emotional care. They're done not out of obligation, but because they carry meaning. Even the mundane parts of life feel lighter, more connected, because they're shared. For some, love transforms the ordinary into something special. But when love diminishes, even these routines start to feel empty. The smile that used to accompany the morning greeting fades. The text that once said, "I can't wait to see you," now just says, "I'll be home at 6." Conversations become centered around logistics, schedules, errands, and responsibilities, while the emotional content quietly fades away. The connection that once made routine feel intimate is replaced with a colder, more functional tone. The gestures are still there, but the presence behind them is not. You might notice that time together no longer feels like something they look forward to, but more like something they're just showing up for because they have to. There's a big difference between choosing to be with someone and simply not leaving. You can feel that difference in the energy. Date nights become repetitive, or they're cancelled entirely. Holidays and special events lose their spark. The surprise, the effort, the thoughtfulness that once made those moments memorable slowly fade. Everything starts to feel like a performance, going through the motions of a relationship instead of truly being in one. The emotional atmosphere starts to shift as well. There's less laughter, less spontaneity. Everything feels a bit more muted, like life is being lived in black and white instead of in full color. You can feel that your presence doesn't excite or comfort them the way it used to. There's a distance even when you're sitting side by side, and you might start questioning yourself, wondering if you've changed or if you're asking for too much. But it's not about asking for too much. It's about realizing that what was once freely given is now being withheld or offered out of obligation. This mechanical rhythm of being together without truly connecting is one of the most painful forms of disconnection. It doesn't announce itself with conflict or absence. It hides behind consistency. It gives the illusion that everything is fine because the surface hasn't cracked yet, but underneath the foundation is weakening. The relationship has stopped growing, stopped deepening. It's become a cycle of repetition rather than a shared effort to build something together. And what makes this change so difficult to face is how easy it is to ignore. It's simple to mistake presence for participation, but you can feel it in the energy. You can feel it when you speak and their eyes glaze over. You can feel it when moments of connection feel forced, when the time spent together feels more like shared space than shared experience. It's not that the love is actively being taken away, it's that it's no longer being invested in. Without that investment, even the most stable routine becomes a slow, quiet kind of emotional starvation. When someone begins to fall out of love, there's a subtle but powerful shift in how they interpret your actions, your words, even your silence. Where there was once kindness in how they saw you, there begins to be a quiet, creeping judgment. It's not explosive criticism or open contempt, not at first. It starts in the gap between what you say and how they respond. The tone of their replies changes. The quirks that used to make them smile now seem to irritate them. The things that were once accepted or even admired are now viewed through a lens of annoyance, impatience, or emotional fatigue. In the early stages of love, we extend grace to one another. We interpret things with affection. If you're late, it's because you're busy. If you're quiet, it's because you're tired. If you make a mistake, it's no big deal. There's room for imperfection. But when love begins to fade, that grace diminishes. The same lateness now feels like disrespect. The same silence is seen as emotional withdrawal. The same mistake becomes proof of something deeper, something wrong with you, something wrong with the relationship. Your actions haven't really changed, but their perception of you has. And perception is everything when it comes to love. What was once met with empathy is now met with suspicion. What were once needs met with care are now seen as demands. When your feelings are dismissed, brushed off as being too sensitive, dramatic, or needy, the person who used to listen with patience becomes impatient. The space that once allowed you to be open and vulnerable starts to shrink. When you share something honest, something raw, it's no longer seen as bravery, it's seen as a burden. This shift can leave you in emotional confusion. You might begin to question if you're the problem. You start editing yourself, shrinking, tiptoeing around your own truth, all to avoid another dismissive reaction. This change in how you're seen often comes with subtle forms of blame. They might not say it directly, but you can feel it in their tone, their body language, the silence, and the distance. They may start to act like the issues in the relationship are all because of your flaws. They stop taking responsibility for their own actions and focus more on your mistakes. Conversations shift to what you did wrong. If there's tension, it's because of something you said. If there's distance, it's because you're either too much or not enough. It starts to feel like you can't stand on equal ground anymore. Eventually, this emotional imbalance wears you down. You might find yourself constantly trying to prove your worth, trying to win back their approval, trying to fix things you're not even sure are yours to fix. You bend yourself to meet changing standards, hoping that if you just say or do the right thing, the warmth will come back. But it doesn't. The issue isn't with your actions, it's with their heart, which has already started to shut down. Once someone starts to see everything you do through the lens of withdrawal, even your best intentions can seem like offenses. You're no longer seen in the same way. You're no longer evaluated from a place of love, but from a place of disconnection. That shift hurts, not just because it feels like rejection, but because it's happening right in front of you, while you're still trying, still hoping. Love can't survive in a place where one person is trying to connect and the other is already checking out, rewriting the story as they go. When perception turns against you, love doesn't fade with one big argument or breakup. It fades with 1,000 small misunderstandings that slowly change how they see you. So when love begins to leave, it doesn't make noise. It whispers. It shows up in the silences that weren't there before, in the eyes that no longer light up, in the words that go unsaid. The hardest part is not the end itself, but the slow erosion that happens while you're still holding on. It's in the silence that used to feel safe but now feels like distance. It's in the routine that used to represent connection but now feels like a routine. The signs are always there. The withdrawal, the quiet dismissals, the fading closeness, the change in tone, and the coldness. The tragedy is that by the time you notice these signs, a part of you has already started to question your own worth. But here's the truth, you are not hard to love. You are not too much, you are not broken. What you're seeing is someone's heart changing, and that isn't your fault. Your strength lies in not forcing love to return, but in seeing the truth for what it is, and choosing to honor yourself despite it. Real love doesn't pull away when faced with you. It leans in, stays curious, and works to understand. When that's gone, what you're left with isn't love, it's just the memory of it.